this is a tremendous opportunity that we have to learn together as a group, especially during this time. And I missed everybody over our Pesach break, and I'm happy that we're back. You know, the chapter that we're about to start in Masechah Shabbos, if you have a hard copy in front of you, that's great. If not, we have the screen share open. This chapter we're about to start, the 7th chapter. If you recall, we referenced the chapter. In fact, we actually learned these two Mishnayos already. We're going to learn them more in depth now, but we learned them as part of our introduction to the entire tractate, which, you know, it wasn't my great idea to do that. In fact, the very first Tosfos in Masechah Shabbos wonders why is it that the entire Masechta doesn't start with this chapter. And he gives his answer. You know, we discussed that in the past, but you know, it just speaks volumes of the fact of how important this chapter is. And in fact, the name of the chapter itself is Kollel Gadol, the great principle. This chapter is the great principle of the laws of Shabbos, particularly about the laws pertaining to the prohibition of Shabbos, when one would have to bring a carbon. With regard to Shabbos, the Torah tells us that if one violates Shabbos, mechalela mos yumas, that one would be put to death. Now, the Gemara makes it very clear that is only the case if the person who violates Shabbos was warned accordingly, that they were warned through Eidim, through witnesses. And in fact, the Minchas Chinuch is very fond of quoting a Rashi in Masechah Shavuos on Daf Tes. You know, every like 20 or 30 pages, the Minchas Chinuch of Rabbi Yosef Babad, the Av Beis Din of Chernobyl. He is very fond of quoting this Rashi. That Rashi says that not only do you have to give them a warning, but the witnesses would have to give the warning by quoting the actual pasuk. That the witnesses would have to say to the person, "You better not break Shabbos because mechalela mos yumas," because then we're going to have to put you to death. And then the person has to respond and say, "Yes, I'm aware of that, and I'm going to do it anyway." And in fact, there's another Tosos. There's Tosos in Masechah Shabbos, the beginning of the 20th chapter, Masechah Shabbos on Daf Kuf Lamed Tes, tells us that you have to become even more detailed than that. Not only do you have to quote the pasuk, but if they're doing a tolda, if they're doing a subcategory, which we'll get to, avos and toldos, the principal types of work, the 39 principal types of labor that one cannot do on Shabbos, and then the sub-principal malachos, the subcategories. Toso says that if someone is doing the subcategories, you have to tell them the specific subcategory of the specific malacha that they're doing in order for them to violate Shabbos. The Tosos Rid argues on Tosos in Shas, but nevertheless, it speaks volumes of just how difficult it is for Beis Din to push through the punishment of death. Okay, so then what's the second tier? The second tier is if someone violates Shabbos knowingly, they're aware of what they're doing. There are no witnesses that are, you know, warning them or anything like that, but they are very aware of what they're doing, and they do it anyway. Then they would get the punishment of kareh, spiritual excommunication. However, the most common form of violating Shabbos is one that is a chatas, one that would result in the bringing of a carbon. And that's really where our Mishnah comes in. The Mishnah teaches us the following. Kollel Gadol Amru b'Shabbos, that there is a great principle surrounding the laws of Shabbos. What are the principles? The following. Number 1, Kol hashocheach ikar Shabbos, va'asa malachos harbe, b'Shabbosos harbe, eino chayav ela chatas hachas. Let's say someone at some point in time learned that there is a concept of Shabbos. In grade school, they learned that the 7th day of the week is the Holy Sabbath, and one is not allowed to do work on that day. They learn about the concept of Shabbos. But as time goes on, they forgot that there is even a concept of Shabbos. They are so removed from any sort of Jewish education that the 7th day of the week is Saturday. It's not Shabbos. They completely forgot that Shabbos even exists. Then later in life, give it another couple years down the road, they start learning more again, and they realize, oh my gosh, I totally forgot that there's a whole concept called Shabbos. So what the Mishnah tells us is that there's an obligation to bring a carbon, to bring a chatas offering, a sin offering, as a result of having violated that one big violation of Shabbos. Now, you might be thinking, well, they probably did many violations of Shabbos, let's say over the course of that 2-year, 3-year, 4-year period, where they completely forgot that there was even a concept of Shabbos, 20-year period where they completely forgot that there was a concept of Shabbos. They could have done many, 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 many malachos. In fact, they probably did thousands of malachos over the course of that time. So then if that's the case, they should have to bring thousands of chatos. So the Mishnah is teaching us something very important right now. The Mishnah is teaching us something that's really based off of a pasuk in Parshas Vayikra, that what the Torah is telling us, what the Mishnah is telling us, codifying for us from the Torah, is that in order to be obligated to bring a carbon on Shabbos, one needs to be very aware of what they did. That from the time they started the prohibition until they ended the prohibition, they need to be aware of what they did, okay? So if someone is not aware that there's even a concept of Shabbos, so then that in and of itself is one obligation of a chatas. Meaning the violation of the transgression is different than the obligation to bring the carbon, to bring the offering. Meaning one can violate many transgressions, but only be obligated to bring one carbon, because all of those transgressions were violated under one lapse of an understanding as to what you were doing. I did not realize that there was even a concept of Shabbos, and therefore once you know again that that there is a concept of Shabbos, all you would have to do is bring one chatas. And now this—
Ask a quick question on that?
Yeah, of course.
So normally the word shocheach means that you knew something and you forgot it.
Right.
What you seem to be saying is you might, even if you never knew about it, this might be, it
Right.
might also include that case. And so I'm just curious if somebody, especially in our time, somebody who grows up that never learned it.
Never knew at all that there was such a concept of the Sabbath.
Right. Would that fall under shocheach in this definition?
It seems to be a machlokes between the Rambam and the Ravid.
Okay.
The Ravid was older than the Rambam. I think I don't know if I've mentioned this before. The Rambam was older than the Ravid was older than the Rambam, and the Rambam writes in the introduction to his work that I'm putting together this book, and all you're going to need is my book that codifies all of Jewish law, and you're going to need a Tanakh in order so that you can know the history, so you can know the ethics, you can have the written law. You can have the written Torah, and the oral Torah is all comprised within my book. The Ravid then writes in the introduction to his notes on the Rambam, he says some kid wrote a book. He's got no clue what he's talking about, and throughout the work, he's berating the Rambam. So this is another one of those points where the Ravid kind of says to the Rambam, you have no clue what you're talking about, but it ends up being a machlokas in the Rambam and the Ravid. It's not like we can look it up in Shulchan Aruch, because this only makes a difference with regard to bringing a chatas, and today, unfortunately, we don't have the Beis Hamikdash, so it's not recorded in Shulchan Aruch. But this principle of that in order to bring a chatas offering, the chatas is based on a lapse of understanding, right? That I'm only obligated to bring a chatas, not for every single avera that I did, but for each misunderstanding that I had. So that same principle now plays itself out further in the next part of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Hayodea Iker Shabbos. I know what Shabbos is. I know what the Sabbath is. But let's say I thought today was Tuesday, right? I know that there's such a concept of the Sabbath, but I completely did not realize that today is Shabbos. Also malachas harbe, and I did many different things. I gardened and I sowed and I did all these different things on Shabbos. B'Shabbosos harbe, over the course of many Shabbosos, my calendar was just mixed up. My phone got messed up, and every single day I look at my phone, and where it should have said Saturday, it ends up saying Tuesday. So I don't realize, and then every Tuesday I end up keeping Shabbos, right? The whole thing gets mixed up. So what would be the halacha then? So again, that is a lapse. How often? Once a week. There's once a week where I have a lapse, right? I know what Shabbos is, so I don't have this general one giant lapse of an understanding, but rather I have weekly misunderstandings of when Shabbos is, and therefore chayav al kol Shabbos v'Shabbos. Then I just have to bring a carbon chatas for each Shabbos that I violated. So if this went for 15 weeks straight until I got my act together and I got a better understanding of the calendar, so then I'd have to bring 15 chatos to the Beis Hamikdash. Now this principle carries further, and it becomes more likely example. Hayodeshu Shabbos v'asam malachos harbe. So then now I know it's Shabbos. I know when Saturday is. I know what Shabbos is. I'm aware of all that. I know when the Sabbath is. I know when it's Shabbos. But I didn't realize that one is not allowed to garden on Shabbos. I thought Shabbos is supposed to be the most relaxing day of the week. And therefore, what's to me is very relaxing. It's very relaxing for me to go and garden in my backyard. For me to water my plants is the most relaxing thing. And therefore, that's how I want to spend my Shabbos. So I know it's Shabbos. I'm well aware of what I'm doing, but I don't realize I'm violating the Shabbos. So I know Hayodeshu Shabbos va'asam malachos harbe. I know it's Shabbos, but then I do a lot of malachos b'Shabbosos harbe over the course of many Shabbosos. I do this for 15 weeks straight. Chayev al kol av malacho malacha. So I garden and I sow. I water my plants and I mow my lawn and I do all these different things. So I have to bring a carbon for each and every malacha that I do. Now, why is it that I have to bring a carbon for each malacha? In the Torah, it says in the Torah, it says that one is not allowed to violate Shabbos, right? Lo sa'aseh bo malacha. You're not allowed to do any work on that day. So then if that's the case, I had one misunderstanding for one violation of the Torah every single week. So then if that's the case, even though on this Shabbos I did 30 malachos, or 39 malachos even, and then next Shabbos I did 39 different malachos, not realizing that I was violating Shabbos, I knew it was Shabbos. So the Mishnah says I have to bring a carbon for each and every one of those 39 malachos. However, all it says in the Torah is one violation of Shabbos, it seems like. So then why would I have to bring 39 chatos? So this is the concept called chiluk malachos, where the Gemara tells us on Daf Ayin in Masechah Shabbos that even though the Torah only has one violation of Shabbos, it only has not doing work. However, we know from our oral tradition that violation is 39 separate violations, you can call them sub-violations, attached to that one major violation, that one transgression, where there's one basic principle of one cannot do work on Shabbos. However, that prohibition of not doing work on Shabbos has 39 ways to violate it. Those are the 39 malachos, which we'll get to in next Mishnah. You point out right over here at the bottom of the page. It says, Avos malachos arbayim chasa'achas, that there are 40 minus 1 malachos. There are 39 malachos. There are 39 ways of violating the prohibition of the Torah of lo sa'aseh bo malacha, do not do work on Shabbos. This is the concept called chiluk malachos, where Shabbos is basically the exception to the rule. Where the rule we said before is that every time I violate the prohibition in one lapse of an understanding, so then for each lapse of an understanding of the violation of that transgression, so then I have to bring a chatas for that lapse of understanding. Shabbos, however, if I have a lapse of understanding that of the one prohibition of lo sa'aseh malacha, and I do 39 types of lo sa'aseh malacha, then I have to bring 39 karbanos. However, if I do, let's say I garden, I plant 2 plants in my garden, that is the same malacha that I did twice, and therefore I'd have to only bring 1 chatas. It's all within this same principle. Then the Mishnah ends off, Ha'osa malachos harbe me'ein malacha achas, eino chai v'lachatas achas. Exactly what we just said, that if I do multiple forms of the same malacha, so I plant and I prune my trees and I do it's all basically the same thing. It's all a malacha of zoreya. So then all I have to do is bring one chatas because it was one lapse of this one malacha of zoreya, of planting. Okay. I'd like to take a look now at the...
So I assume all this is in the context of unintentional violation.
This is all right.
Yeah.
This is all...
If it's intentional, it would be very different.
If it was intentional, so then you would you get the punishment of kares, of spiritual excommunication, right? That's what we said before. Whereas what we're talking about is shogeg, where it's completely unintentional. Take a look at the Rambam. Take a look at this Rambam over here. The Rambam in the second chapter of Hilchos Shgagos, where the Rambam basically gives all the background to what we just explained, where you're going to be obligated to bring a carbon dependent on your lapse of understanding, right? Obviously, it's unintentional, and it's one general lapse of an understanding, not that you violate the multiple prohibitions, and therefore I'd have to bring multiple carbonos. No, it's that it's all under one lapse of understanding that this prohibition is even an issue. That's when I have to bring a chatas. And he explains things a little bit more. Take a look. The Rambam says, "Ein adam chayav chatas al shkagaso," that a person is not obligated to bring a carbon chatas until sheyesh shogeg mitchila va'asof, unless it was completely unintentional, as Jim pointed out before, from the beginning of my activity till the end of my activity. Okay? Where, let's say I intentionally brought something, this is what the Rambam continues to explain. Let's say I intentionally carried outside the Erev. I know I'm not allowed to carry outside the Erev on Shabbos, and nevertheless, I stick my keys in my pocket and I walk outside the Erev. Okay? However, it was unintentional for me to place them down outside the Erev, which is the second half of the prohibition. There's a prohibition of carrying it out and then placing it down. So I take it outside the Erev intentionally, but then unintentionally I place it down. So there, I would not be obligated in a carbon chatas at all. Why? Because that's not called shogeg. That's not called me violating the entire malacha with in an unintentional way. It needs to be the entire malacha, all behelem achas, all with one lapse of an understanding. So this brings us back to the next Mishnah. Now, the next Mishnah is probably the most famous Mishnah in the entire Masechta. This is the Mishnah that lists the 39 malachos. We haven't gotten to this yet. We had to have known this in order to understand the Masechta basically till now. But basically from now until about the 20th chapter. So basically for the next 13 chapters, we are going to be spending our time learning the 39 malachos, the 39 forms of the violation of not doing work on Shabbos. The Mishnah says the following: Avos malachos arbayim chasar achas. There are 40 minus 1 avos malachos. The Gemara, by the way, says, why do you have to tell me the number? Just tell me the list. I can count myself. I'm a smart guy. It's higher mathematics, not a big deal. I can count it myself. Why do you have to tell me the number? So the Gemara says that it's because it's coming off of the last Mishnah, where the last Mishnah ended by telling me that there are that you could do multiple prohibitions of multiple forms of the same prohibition, and you'd have to bring a carbon for each of those forms. That's why the Mishnah is coming to tell me, well, what's the most amount of carbonos that I'd be able to bring after one Shabbos? That number is 39. Okay? So what are they? So we'll get to the list. But the first one is hazoreya, planting. How would one violate the prohibition of planting? So if I were to ask you, what would you guys tell me? How does one violate the prohibition of planting? It's not a trick question. I mean, it's a little bit of a trick question. But how would one violate the prohibition of planting on Shabbos?
Well, putting seed in the ground.
I put a seed in the ground, right? That would be so Harvey's saying exactly like the Rashash. The Rashash was he's a commentary on the Gemara. He's a very popular commentary on the Gemara. He has a comment on every single daf in Shas. He's one of the few achronim that do. But what's even more impressive than the Rashash having a comment on every single daf in Shas is that the Rashash was a businessman. I think he was actually an accountant. He was not a professional Rav. He was not a Rosh Yeshiva. He was an accountant. And even accountants can end up having probably one of the most popular commentaries on the entire Gemara, and has a comment on every single daf in Shas. So the Rashash says exactly like Harvey said. What do you mean? It's putting a seed in the ground. The Minchas Chinuch, it always comes back to the Minchas Chinuch. The Minchas Chinuch, Rav Yosef Babad, says the Rashash is wrong. Why? Because if I put a seed in the ground and then I take it out right away, was anything planted? Did anything happen? Nothing happened. In order to violate Shabbos, so then I need to do something. Something needs to happen. There needs to be some sort of a creative activity that takes place. If I put something onto if I cut off, let's say my wheat from my field, so then I did something. Before it was a wheat that was in the ground. Now it's wheat out of the ground. There was a result that took place. Every malacha needs to have a result. There needs to be a maisa and a totzah. There needs to be the action and the result of my action. In fact, this is how the Maggid Mishnah says you can understand the difference between whether or not something is whether or not something is an av or a tolda. Something's the principal malacha versus just a subset of the malacha. How does one know? So the Maggid Mishnah says that an av malacha has both a maisa and a tolda, whereas a maisa and a totzah, an action and a result, versus a tolda has one of the two. Either has the same action, but does not have the same result, or it has the same result with a different action. And that's how you know it's a tolda. So every single malacha needs to have both, and at least an av malacha needs to have an action and a result. If I put a seed in the ground, nothing happens. It needs some time. In fact, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah has a whole discussion. How long does it take for seeds to take root? Does it take 3 days? Does it take 13 days? Does it take 30 days? And you ask a botanist, don't ask me. But it takes time. It doesn't happen immediately. It takes time for the seed to break down and then for its roots to take. So if nothing happened, if I just put a seed in the ground, nothing happened. And therefore, how could that be a violation of Shabbos? So says the Minchas Chinuch, in order for me to violate Shabbos, by doing the malacha of planting, it needs to be that I put the seed in the ground and that it actually ends up, and then I have to leave it there. I can't just put it in the ground. I have to leave it there until it takes root, until the roots sprout and it starts to take root. And if I don't do that, then I never violated the prohibition of planting on Shabbos, unless I left it there. That's what the Minchas Chinuch says. However, there's a big problem with this. What's the big problem with this? That the definition of the prohibition of planting on Shabbos is by me leaving it in the ground and letting it take root. When does it end up taking root? We just said it takes a few days. It doesn't happen on Shabbos. So I put the seed in the ground on Shabbos. Again, unintentionally. I forgot that one is not allowed to plant on Shabbos. And then a few days later, it takes root. And it's then that I have violated the prohibition of Shabbos. What did we just learn in the Rambam? That in order for me to violate Shabbos and be obligated to bring a karban, the entire malacha needs to take place. The entire prohibition needs to take place with a lapse of an understanding. The entire thing needs to be unintentional. from the beginning till the end. That's what the Rambam said, mitchila v'ad sof. So if that's the case, so if I put a seed in the ground and only 3, 4, 10 days later, a month later, it takes root, so you can't say that that's all one long violation of Shabbos. Why? Because it's no longer Shabbos. That Shabbos is over. Now it's Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. It's during the week. So I just think it's violating Shabbos on Wednesday. I can't violate Shabbos on Wednesday or Thursday. I can only violate Shabbos on Shabbos. So if I put the seed in the ground and it takes root 3, 4 days later, I, by definition, did not violate Shabbos. That's the big problem over here. How are we going to answer this question on the Minchas Chinuch? So, Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, in the Har Tzvi, Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank was unbelievable. He was the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim in the 60s. He was an unbelievable Talmid Chacham. Amazing. Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank was chavrusas with Rav Yechiel Michal Tukachinsky. Rav Yechiel Michal Tukachinsky was another tremendous genius. In fact, the Chazon Ish called Rav Yechiel Michal Tukachinsky a genius, and he actually called him a great genius. Which, when I call someone a genius, that's not such a big deal. When the Chazon Ish calls someone a genius, that's a big deal. And the two of them were chavrusas. In fact, Rav Ovadia Yosef writes in his introduction to the Abia Omer, he tells a story. He talks about the importance of reviewing your Torah, and he tells a story between the two of them, that Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, the Rabbi Shel Yerushalayim, the Rav of Yerushalayim, and Rav Yechiel Michal Tukachinsky, who was the one that comprised the modern calendar with all of the minhagim of Klal Yisrael contained within it. So he tells a story that the two of them were learning B'chavrusa, Meseches Yevamos, which is one of the hardest Mesechtas in all of Shas. In fact, the Zohar says it's one of the top 3 hardest Mesechtas, along with Erevin and Nida. And in Meseches Yevamos they were learning, and the way Meseches Yevamos works is that the first 90 pages of Meseches Yevamos is kind of like its own Mesechta. And then the last 30 pages is like a brand new Masechta. So usually when people learn Yevamos, it's that they learn the first 90 pages, and that's like they basically like finished a tractate. And then there's another smaller appendix to the Masechta that comes up at the end, the last 30 pages. So they learned the first 90 pages of Yevamos together, and they learned it and they reviewed it 90 times. And then one of them, I forgot who, said to the other, "Okay, let's do it another 30 times." And the other one, I think it was Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, said, no, and it's time to move on now. But it was only after reviewing it 90 times that he felt comfortable moving on. Just reviewing it a few times or even just doing it once was not good enough for him. You needed to review it 90 times so you become the Gedolei Yisrael. So Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank writes in his Har Tzvi, in his responsa, he deals with this issue and he gives an answer based off of a comment from the Nemuke Yosef. The Nemuke Yosef, I like to call him the Nemuke Joe. The Nemuke Joe was a commentary on the Rif, Rabbeinu Alfasi, one of the earliest halachic codifiers on the Talmud. He lived in the 10th century. So the Nemuke Yosef, who lived only in the end of the 14th century, so he deals with the following Gemara. The Gemara says that it has a discussion about when I when I light a fire, let's say I commit arson, okay? So the Gemara says, Isho, fire, what is that like? Meaning what kind of nezek, what kind of damage did I do? Is that like I did it myself? That it's isho mishum chitzio, that it's like I pulled an arrow, right? Where, I shot a gun, where it's like, something that came from me, like I did it? Or do we see fire as like its own entity, and it's like my property that caused damage? Like if my bull or my ox were to go do damage to someone, that's the way we treat fire. And with regard to Nezikin, it makes a big difference which one it's like. But for our purposes, the Nemuke Yosef asked a question where it seems like in the Gemara we paskin that fire is like chetzio. It's like my arrow, where if I commit arson, it's like my arrow that I shot off and it caused damage on the other side. Says the Nemuke Yosef that he has a problem. The problem is that how does a woman ever light Shabbos candles? Or not just a woman, but a man, if there's no lady in the house. So then they're obligated to light Shabbos candles. How does one ever light Shabbos candles? It says in Mukhe Yosef, because according to this Gemara, that it's like my arrow, and basically from my doing my action right now, it's like my action continues on later, and that's what me sending off my fire is like. So then if that's the case, if I light Shabbos candles right now on Friday afternoon, and they're going to stay lit into Shabbos, so then what's that going to be like? It's going to be like me lighting a fire on Shabbos itself. Therefore, one should never be able to light Shabbos candles. This is the question. This is the question of the Nemuke Joe on the Gemara and Bava Kama on Daf Chaf Beis. This is the big question. How does one ever light Shabbos candles? If I light a fire right now, my action continues on the same way. Like if I shoot a gun, the action of me pulling the trigger continues until the bullet finishes the damage that it started. So then, if that's the case, so then how could I ever light Shabbos candles? I light the Shabbos candles right now. They're going to be lit through a couple hours into Shabbos. Then if that's the case, I can't light Shabbos candles. It's going to be a violation of Shabbos. So Rav Soloveitchik thought the whole question was ridiculous in and of itself, because there's no such thing as violating Shabbos before Shabbos, right? My action needs to be done on Shabbos. But the Nemuke Yosef would say back that it is your action being done on Shabbos, because it's like my action continues. It's like I'm doing it right now. So the Nemuke Yosef answers an amazing answer. He says that when I light a fire, when I commit arson, or I pull a trigger on a gun, we view any subsequent damage that's going to take place, any people it's going to kill, as happening at the moment that I pull the trigger. At the moment that I pull back my bow and the arrow goes off, it's at that moment that whatever damage that's going to happen, I did right now. When I commit arson, whenever I strike the match and light it to the building, if the whole building crumbles to the ground because of my lighting the fire, it's as if the whole building fell right now. And therefore, when I light Shabbos candles, when I light the Shabbos candles right now, so then we view as if the entire candle burnt down right now, not on Shabbos. That's what the Nemuke Yosef's answer is. So comes along with Tzvi Pesach Frank, and he says, so now I can understand the prohibition of Zoreya. Because as long as my absent-mindedness, my lapse of an understanding happened throughout the course of the Shabbos that I did the original action, so then we view as if the entire action happened right now, meaning even though the roots might not take place until a few days from now, we view as if it happened right now. So there's only one issue. There's only one issue with this explanation. The only issue is that there's a Mishnah in Maseches Tmuros. The Mishnah in Maseches Tmuros, I think it's in the Parak Beis Mishnah Daled. The Mishnah tells us that if someone planted on Shabbos, and they already did it, they already made the mistake and they planted on Shabbos, so the Mishnah says there's nothing wrong with leaving it. You can leave it, not an issue. You could just leave it and you'll be able to use, let's say, the tomatoes that you planted on Shabbos. You could leave it there and not a big deal. According to this understanding, that would be a very stupid thing to do, because if I could save myself because it hasn't taken roots yet, so then who cares if I did it on Shabbos? I could save myself by uprooting it before the roots take place. So that's the Shvisa Shabbos asked that question, but I never saw a good answer for it. But anyway, this is the basic introduction we have to the 7th chapter of Masechah Shabbos. God willing, next time we'll continue with the going through the malachos. If time was not, against us, what I would do is I would spend every single class, basically for the next 38 classes. We already did Zoreya. The next 38 classes going through every single one of these. And I think it's in our best interest instead that what I'll do is for the second Mishnah, I'll cover the malachos that are not going to be covered in depth throughout the rest of the Masechta. The ones that are just get just scanned over throughout the rest of the tractate, those are the ones we'll do now, because throughout the rest of the tractate, we'll come back to the other, I guess we can call them more popular malachos, the ones that have more shilas, more practicality attached to them. All right, very good. So we'll stop here for now.
Yeah, Rabbi, I have a question.
Sure, yeah, any questions, just ask questions.
Yeah, so could you also address the order in which they're listed and why
Yeah, so
I mean, at some point, you don't have to do it.
No. We're going to discuss that next time, because and I'll just point out the question right now is that plowing should be listed before planting, right? So
there's some other questions too, but
yeah. So we'll get to that. Yeah. Bli neder.
Okay.
All right. Very good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Everybody, how's everybody holding up? Everybody's good? Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, good. Everybody
I haven't shot too many arrows into people yet.
Oh, good. All right. You're one step ahead of me then.
Yeah.
All right. Very good.
Hey,
All right.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.